Projekt Guru.
Всем привет! С вами Zak Novak на радиостанции Novorossia Rocks. Welcome to Novorossia Rocks Radio Station. This is Zak Novak, your American in downtown Donetsk. Program is called Projekt Guru, and Guru is in the house as always. My engineer Andre on vacation for 10 days. Enjoy your vacation, Andre. Let's go right to it. A woman in Turkey's northern province of Zonguldak, is facing 4 years in prison for allegedly assaulting Nazi President Erdogan on Facebook. In a post written when Erdogan was serving as prime minister in 2014, according to the public prosecutor's indictment, the 22-year-old woman, identified only by her initials DS, committed the crime during an argument on Facebook with a man identified only as Murat K on Facebook February 18, 2014. After the exchange, Murat K filed a criminal complaint claiming that DS had insulted the prime minister and insulted an individual during the argument. He also claimed that her friend, identified only as BD, had insulted the individual. The indictment demands 4 years in jail for DS on 2 counts and 2 years in jail for her friend. Hundreds of Turkish citizens have been investigated and many sentenced on charges of insulting Nazi Erdogan since he became president in 2014. Insanity from Nazi Turkey. A woman facing 4 years prison for insulting President Erdogan. Madness. Guru, check this out. Now fascist Germany joins Nazi Turkey. You are not allowed to insult the Führer, Erdogan. Popular German comedian Jan Böhmermann is facing up to 5 years in prison in Germany for violating a law against insulting foreign heads of state after reading a poem mocking Turkish President Erdogan on television. The German law carries a sentence of 3 years for general insults, and that penalty extends to 5 years if the insult is intentionally slanderous, which Böhmermann comments were. Erdogan has repeatedly complained to the German government about satirical programs mocking him. Böhmermann read the poem as a direct message to Erdogan, meant to explain the difference between satirical commentary and direct slander, providing his poem as the latter. In it, he accused him of having oral sex with hundreds of sheep. Erdogan has reacted furiously to even tepid criticism historically, and is believed to be leaning heavily on Germany to do something. Böhmermann's massive popularity, however, may make this a serious test to the German law itself and force a rethink. Guru, listen to this. More atrocities committed by the Obama regime as U.S. drone kills 17 civilians in Afghanistan. Governor Shaista Khan Akhtarzada of Afghanistan's Gomal district in Paktika province has announced an investigation into a series of U.S. drone strikes in the district, confirmed at least 17 civilians were killed in a series of incidents. Former Senator Haji Mohammed Hassan also confirmed the incident, saying there were 3 strikes in the district and that one had killed a high-profile tribal figure, Haji Ruziddin, who was trying to mediate a land dispute. U.S. Brigadier General Charles Cleveland confirmed only 2 of the 3 strikes and insisted that there was no evidence that any of the slain were civilians, despite the comments from top local officials, including the district governor. The U.S. is often late to acknowledge civilian deaths and strikes in Afghanistan, though the Afghan Defense Ministry also claimed that they believed that the attacks in Gomal had killed Taliban. While it's unclear how the attacks were launched, this could suggest the Defense Ministry was involved in the targeting, which would explain their reluctance to consider reports of civilian casualties. This one in Yemen. Investigation confirms the death of 119 civilians by U.S.-made bombs in Yemen. On March 15, Saudi warplanes attacked a crowded marketplace in the northern Yemeni Shiite town of Mastaba, killing 119 civilians. The attack was among the deadliest Saudi strikes on civilians in Yemen since the war began last year, a conflict which has killed in excess of 3,000 civilian bystanders, mostly in airstrikes. Human Rights Watch, which investigated the incident, has found evidence that the deaths were caused by U.S.-made bomb, a GBU-31 satellite-guided bomb. U.S. sales to Saudi Arabia in November included 400 such bombs. Human rights groups have been increasingly critical of the U.S. and other Western nations for massive arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Noting the huge number of civilians they've been killing, the UN reports have accused the Saudis of deliberately targeting civilians in many cases, thanks to the Obama regime. The EU has even gone so far as to pass a long-binding resolution urging its members to stop sales to the Saudis, though by and large this hasn't happened yet. The US has been heavily involved in arming the Saudis and has also participated in a war on Yemen, refueling Saudi bombers and providing ships to take part in the naval blockade. Guru, Russians scrambling trying to save a ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh. Russian officials are scrambling to try to save a ceasefire in Nagorno-Karabakh after bloody 4 days of fighting between Azerbaijan and forces backed by neighboring Armenia. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was dispatched to Azeri capital with Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev heading to Armenia. Both sides are blaming the other for starting the weekend fighting and are similarly trading accusations of massive numbers of ceasefire violations now that the truce was agreed to, with the Azeri Defense Ministry claiming Armenian forces had violated the ceasefire 119 times in the past 24 hours. Nagorno-Karabakh is recognized by the UN as part of Azerbaijan, but since 1994 has been controlled by an Armenian-backed government. The population is overwhelmingly ethnic Armenian. Russia has good relations with both nations, but a formal defense treaty with Armenia. 5,000 Russian troops are also stationed in Armenia, primarily as a hedge against a potential Turkish invasion in case the fighting spreads. Turkey has loudly backed Azerbaijan over this claim. U.S. and Russia pushing for a new constitution for Syria as Russia supports Kurdish autonomy. According to diplomats familiar with the situation, U.S. and Russian officials have begun the process of writing the new constitution for Syria, with officials saying they want the framework in place by August. The plan has always been for the Syrian civil war to be resolved by a new constitution leading to elections, but the absence of any Syrian involvement in the penning of a new document is conspicuous, underscoring how much of the effort is still just the international community imposing a solution on Syria. Not that it necessarily makes the process any easier, as the U.S. is continuing to take position that the Constitution needs to restrict certain Syrian officials, including President Assad, from ever participating in elections again. Russia, by contrast, has insisted that the free elections in Syria should be open to all and that the future government of Syria should be up to the Syrians. This support for Syrian self-determination doesn't appear to extend to writing their own constitution. The U.S. is also pushing hard for a heavily centralized state dominated by a handful of leaders, while Russia has been more supportive of a federal Syria with considerable autonomy for several regions, including particularly the Syrian Kurdistan state. Guru, this is really interesting. Russian troops and heavy weapons to be removed from Moldova through Ukraine. A group of Russian troops staying in Moldova to guard depots of the disbanded 14th Army will be withdrawn into Russia as soon as the issue of the armament pullout and disposal is resolved, Russian Foreign Ministry Ambassador at Large Sergei Gubarov said on Thursday. These armaments can be withdrawn from Moldova into Russia only through the territory of Ukraine, said Gubarov, who is also Russia's envoy at the talks on the Transnistria settlement. But it's difficult to imagine who will assume responsibility for withdrawing several echelons with weapons across Ukraine with such events taking place in that country, the Russian envoy said. The military warehouses were set up during the Soviet period on the territory of Moldova as a republic within the USSR and have been under guard since then, the Russian diplomat said. Russia did not commit its troops to Moldova. Chisinau and Tiraspol far from agreeing on parameters of settlement. According to the diplomat, Moldova and Transnistria are far from reaching an agreement on parameters of political settlement of the conflict. The key to resolving the issue of Transnistria's status is not in Moscow, Washington, or Brussels. It's in Chisinau and Tiraspol. The status will be decided in accordance with what the residents of both sides of the Donetsk River agree on. There are two main hurdles on the way of reaching an agreement, the diplomat said. The first one is the law on the special status of several settlements on the left bank of the Donetsk River, adopted in Chisinau in 2005. The second one in a referendum held by Tiraspol as a response to this law, when the majority of Transnistrian residents spoke in favor of independence and gaining international recognition. position. These two anchors should be pulled out of the ground as they stall the negotiation process on both sides and hamper reaching understanding by Chisinau and Tiraspol on what to do in the future. The international community is two-faced, stabbing the Kurds in the back. They must investigate Ankara's deadly actions. Guru, this is a special report for the Kurds. Europe closes its eyes to Ankara's actions against the Kurdish population because of the migrant crisis, and the EU leaders are being manipulated by Turkey use of the flows of the people from the Middle East. The fact that Kurds are not represented at the Geneva talks on Syria is a big mistake, the Turkish MP said, adding that it is the Kurdish people who are fighting for peace in Syria, who stand against terrorists and extremists, and who shed their blood. Some sides who have nothing to do with Syria are present at the peace talks, while Kurds who are fighting for a democratic Syria are absent from the table. Even defeating Islamic State ISIS in Syria will not solve the problem if the interests of all peoples living in the region are not taken into consideration. Western forces seemingly don't want this to happen. Without the Kurds, the Geneva talks are senseless. While Europe acknowledges Kurds' achievements in fighting ISIS and talk about it at various meetings, they still don't let Kurds sit at the table with them to jointly solve the problem. Everything that the Kurds have achieved in Western Kurdistan has been achieved with their blood. However, alleged Turkish atrocities, well, not alleged, actually Turkish atrocities against the Kurdish population are not being investigated, the deputy said, adding that the Turkish community has tried in vain to appeal to the West for it to investigate and condemn Ankara's actions. When over 100 people have been injured in Cizre, we called for the international community to help them, but got no reply, and all of them were killed. Now, 4 districts are totally destroyed in Cizre. Some 10,000 houses are in completely unlivable condition, including those buildings that did not come under shelling. Turkish troops entered those houses, marauded, and made everything they could do to make the buildings unlivable on purpose, adding that they want to clean the place from the Kurds. Ankara's crackdown on the Kurds in the southeast of Turkey is reminiscent of ISIS atrocities on residents of the Kurdish populated town of Kobani in North Syria, the lawmaker told Sputnik. The violent actions contradict the Turkish constitution and would never help solve the problem. It is a well-known fact that Turkey is moving towards an authoritarian regime. Now, no opposition thinking is tolerated. No opposition thinking is tolerated. I have to repeat that. No opposition thinking is tolerated. Opponents of the authorities are removed by all means. They've launched a crackdown on the media. They imprison people, women as well. Unfortunately, no one is free in Turkey, neither journalists, nor human rights activists, nor the court. But it's the militants who are free to illegally cross the border from Syria every day. Their injured fighters are treated in Turkey and then sent back to fight. It's all documented and proven. So there you have it, the fascist regime of Turkey, Nazi Erdogan, backed by the Obama regime. Atrocities in Turkey and elsewhere. Listen, everybody, it's Friday. Everybody have a great weekend. Please be safe. As I stress always, be on alert. Have a great weekend and see you all on Monday. Bye-bye, folks.